Hey guys, and welcome to another Factorio Friday Facts discussion. As always, I am joined by Scarhoof.
Hello, everyone.
And we have reflections on 2017 Friday Facts 223. So, first off, I want to wish everyone a Happy New Year and hope everyone had a great Christmas. You said you had a good Christmas, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep,
Awesome.
definitely.
Awesome. So, I hope everyone else did as well. So, this is the last Friday Facts of this year. 16.8/9 is out. It almost seems that our team never stops. To be honest, even on Christmas Eve when everything was over and family went to sleep, I couldn't resist to stay up a little while, fix a few things. Typical Factorio people.
Yep.
So this is, I think this is going to be the main discussion point of the video in the Friday Facts. There are some really cool statistics down below and a few cool additions as well. But these changes that were made are interesting and they're pretty huge. Like, these are actually really pretty impactful changes. So fluid balancing, changing follow-ups is in this release. So essentially, they changed the fluid wagon capacity from 75,000 to 25,000, the same as the storage tank. So they cut it in a third, essentially. It's now a third of what it was. They lowered the weight from 3,000 to 1,000, so now it's the same as a cargo wagon. This one I am completely in support of because...
So the trains will move around a little bit quicker.
Yeah, and it really didn't make sense to have, like, you know, like, how was a fluid tanker weighing 3 times as much as a wagon full of ore? You know, like...
Yeah.
I think that one's fine. Change fluid wagon recipe so it requires just 1 storage tank instead of 3. Well, that's good. Lowered barrel fluid capacity from 250 to 50. So cargo wagon with barrels hold 20k and logistics robots are not too strong alternative to carrying fluids. Useless. Decrease barrel and crafting time from 1 second to 0.2 seconds. I guess that's kind of to counteract that. So it's now like 5 times
since you have
as quick.
to go through barrels a lot quicker.
Yeah. So before we give our thoughts, I just want to summarize his thoughts. So the overall feeling we had was that fluid wagon capacity is too large. Fluid trains have to barely move around, and waiting for a fluid wagon to be filled often takes too much time. They also wanted to make sure that the wagon with barrels can't hold more fluids compared to the fluid wagon, because even when barrels are generally more work to handle is not what you would intuitively expect. Which, to me...
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, they put a lot of effort into creating the fluid wagons, so they want those to be kind of the preferred method.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. With the fluid wagon separation gone, the main advantage is barrels are not capacity, but versatility. They can be combined with other barrels of different kinds or items in the train. They can be limited by inventory limit or easily filtered with filter inserters, transported by robots, belts, etc. It seems to be much more intuitive, and I hope it makes sense now as a whole with the removal of fluid wagon separation. So.
Should I ready the bleep button?
You better just hold it down, man. Okay. I'm actually really surprised by the amount of people in favor of this change. And as I was telling Scarhoof, I feel like a lot of these people who are in favor of this probably don't use barrels much to begin with, so don't really care, which is fine. I mean, you know, if it doesn't affect you, it doesn't affect you. That's understandable.
Yeah, one of the nice things about Factorio is that it gives you multiple options to get to the same goal.
Yeah, except not so much now. Like, what part of my issue, right, is it seems between this and the belt balancing thing, the compressed belt, which we went over last Friday Facts, and I think both of our opinions were pretty aligned on that, is it seems like in some ways they're, like, trying to drive players to, like, towards just, like, one option, which to me is, like, the totally wrong direction and seems not what Factorio is. I mean, like you just said.
Right.
You just said it.
Yep. Multiple ways of getting to the same goal.
Yeah, and in my opinion, this is my opinion, all right? So if you disagree, then that's your opinion. But in my opinion, I feel like this was a very bad change for the barrels. The fluid wagon, I think that's okay. I mean, it did cut it in a third, but, I mean, some people said it held too much. Already, it's not that big of... I mean, you'll have to add more wagons, but it's doable, right? So, I mean, but before I continue, what are your thoughts on this whole thing?
Okay, so first off, I just want to point out that number 223 is actually an ammo size.
Is it really?
So,
yeah, it is.
So, maybe we're putting the bullet into the barrels.
Yeah.
This Friday Facts.
emptying it out to almost it's empty.
Yeah. So here's the problem, right? In my head right now, we have three different ways of moving liquids around, right? We've got pipes, we have barrels, and we have the wagons, the storage wagons. So that's kind of our three ways of moving things around. So that's probably, given how we really only had the one prior to before we could barrel all the different liquids. They've essentially, in the last few months, they have given us two more methods of moving liquids around, other than obviously we could do oil barrels for the longest time. But so they're probably looking at it from that perspective of, they used to have one way to move liquids around, which was just pipes. And now we've given them two more options. And so after they've looked at the large scale data of everybody's playthroughs, and, similar to like the ore, right, from a few Friday Facts ago, they saw that an entire playthrough of ore used way too much iron compared to what they thought it needed. So they see that large amount of data and they're able to shift. Individual playstyles could potentially be affected a ton or very little, but the aggregate data most likely points to this needed to be balanced somehow. That being said, I have a Megabus series where I have an entire blue belt full of crude oil barrels that I'm unbarreling and sticking onto a train to move around. And that whole setup is going to be pretty much worthless.
Yep.
Because I had a whole bunch of assemblers spewing those things out. An entire, it was a full blue belt worth of crude oil barrels. And now that whole thing's going to get redone, which of course means that my overall throughput of crude oil into the entire system is going to be severely hampered. It's going to go from, 250 to 50. That right there is going to significantly lower the amount of throughput that I have.
Yeah. And I'm the same way, right? With my huge megabase, sending supporters to space, I have over 400 hours on that map, and I either have to not update that map ever past where it's at now, like Factorio update wise, or use a mod that reverses change, because it will literally break the entire thing. And it's it's experimental, whatever, that's to be expected, but it's really annoying. And then the other thing that gets me is it feels like this isn't balanced, though, now. I feel like the nerf was too much of a nerf to it, because the barrels... I feel like they brought us back down to two methods, essentially. You said we had one, then they gave us three. I feel like we're back down to two, pipes and fluid tankers, because barrels...
The barrels have gotten such a nerf.
They've gotten such a huge nerf that, they're more versatile, which he's right. They're more versatile. That's great. But on anything more than a small to maybe medium scale, they're just worthless for transporting stuff, because not only are they more difficult to set up than a fluid wagon, right? You got to put the barrel, you got to put an unbarreler at the other end, you got to deliver empty and full barrels to it constantly. It's so not only is it more difficult, it carries 5,000 less liquid than a liquid tanker. And then wherever you're getting it from and delivering it to, it now will require 5 times the amount of robots or 5 times the amount of belt space to move those barrels compared to what it did. So it's why would I even use a barrel anymore?
Right. I'm also curious if they are counting the fact that you're only getting half that amount of space, because you still have to remove those. You have to get those empty barrels back. So it's not like every space in a wagon can be filled up with the filled barrels, because half of that space has to be set aside just for the empty barrels to take them back to the source. So you effectively can only fill up half of a wagon with that stuff, unless you have 2 trains. But then again, you're still having to go out of your way. You bring up a good point, and hopefully they accounted for the fact that it's only half. Effectively, your train wagons can only carry half of what their math is saying here.
I don't think so. I don't think that that's a really good point I hadn't thought of, because if each barrel carries 50, they didn't change the barrel stack size, which I think is what they should have done. Someone had suggested that, and it was ignored or looked at and thought wasn't a good idea or whatever. I feel like that would have been a better way to do it, because it would have accomplished kind kind of the same thing. It wouldn't have made the bots as bad as they seem to want to make them, but it wouldn't have like just pretty much made barrels worthless now. If they change the stack size rather than the capacity. But looking at
so
this,
if they didn't account for the fact that half of your cargo wagon has to be set aside, filtered for empty barrels, then they either need to increase the fluid capacity to 100 each to compensate, or they're going to need to double the stack size to 20 or maybe even 25.
Yeah. Yep. You're exactly right. I hadn't thought of that, and I just did the math. They didn't account for it. So actually now a wagon can only carry 10K, and there is a way you can kind of get away with 1 row of empties and 3 rows of fulls if you do it in a very special way. But even in that case, it's still even less, right? It's like, and then some other people made some good points is that like this change, I would not be nearly as frustrated with this if at the same time it came with like pipe and fluid changes or reworks. Because someone made a really good point that, pipes actually, like in comparison, have a pretty limited throughput.
Right.
And now it's like, well, you're barreling on anything past a small scale is pretty much useless. And then, so you're stuck to, the wagon, which essentially turns into pipes, right? Because you got to pump and pipe it out. And it's like that, it's like the fluid mechanics are not very intuitive, I would say. And now they're like kind of forcing you to do that and use the pipes, which have super low throughput. And it's like, I don't know. It's, I am not in favor of all of this. This is so, it seems like too much of a nerf. Like you said, if they made it 100, I think that would be a lot more reasonable rather than 50.
Yeah.
And
I understand why they want the robots to be a little bit weaker than belts. I get that, right? Because robots are too easy it's like the Staples easy button, So I get that they want to give people a little bit more boost when they go through the hassle of making the logistics. But I don't know. Hopefully they will watch it, during this testing phase for the next few weeks and see what people's feedback is after a week or two.
Yeah, I'm not going to count on it because
don't complain to us in the comments. Complain to.
Well, I want to know your thoughts in the comments. I want to know how many people agree or disagree, but also leave your thoughts on the forums.
Let them know.
Yeah, let them know. If you disagree with it, I mean, if you agree with it too, I guess let them know. But they've already made the change, so they're clearly happy with it. But with just one last thing before we move on. Not that they care, because this is a very small majority of the player base, but I should just throw it out there. I was doing some talking with people, and this change potentially could limit, like, mega-base oil builds actually impossible. Because, those big oil builds, you cannot they will not run with just pipes because of the pipe throughput limit, right?
Right.
So they depend on barrels. And now with this, it's like you can't even do that because... I mean, you just need so many of them. You need 5 times as many barrels and 5 times as many bots or belts even to move those barrels. So, this seemed like too much, but we'll see. Whatever. There's already been a mod made to revert it, so I'm going to use that.
Yep. Hey. But that's the problem with building a mega base. You have everything tuned to a certain throughput levels, and when they come in and make sweeping changes like this, it's you can either rebuild the whole thing or just rely on the community to make a mod to set it back. So hopefully they watch the numbers and adjust accordingly.
Yep. So some good stuff. The buffer test finalization. So requester chests always have priority over buffer chests now, and by default, request chests don't even request from buffer chests, only player in construction. This is what we feel is the most common use case, but as we don't want to limit the possibilities, so the behavior can be manually changed. So you can see here now on this requester chest, you can now have it like checkbox if you want to request from buffer chests, which is really cool. Super nice, and they talked about last Friday Facts, they fixed the buffer chest as well to now work how they wanted it to, which is pretty awesome.
Yep.
And
yeah, that was a good change.
Yep. And then the 2007 recapitulation. Recapitulation. So the head of Amanita Design said the products tend to be more creative in the first 3 years of development, and while the last 2 years are more about tweaking, polishing, finishing. Kovarex feels this way about Factorio. That most of the creative work and features have been added already, and now they're kind of finishing it. And he says here pretty much that they definitely intend to release it this year. They keep saying that every year. But they say they do want to finish it in 2018.
Yep, but they really, really need it this time.
Yeah, they really, really need it this time. We'll see. I'm still skeptical. But we'll see. I mean, that'd be great. So to confirm, he said that it doesn't necessarily mean there will be no more features before it's finished, because as he says here, they've kind of paid their debt on other things. Mm-hmm. So they stabilized the multiplayer and rewrote it in 0.14. They created the high-res graphics of stuff. They revisited terrain and decoratives to make it, something they're content with. The blueprint stuff, the internals of how the GUI works, all this stuff that, and the major thing that's left really is the actual GUI, whole rework in 0.17. Mm-hmm. But essentially, to full summarize, the point he's saying here is that now that these things are kind of done, is they can actually focus potentially more on features rather than these other kind of behind the scene things. And then
this seems very similar to what Minecraft's been doing the last few years. Minecraft kind of got away from Notch. He never really expected it to be so popular.
Right.
And when it blew up like that, he had to scramble, because the guy wrote it in a couple weekends in Java or something like that.
Yeah.
If I remember right. It's been so long, 8 years ago. But once they started piling on the features and then everybody had it in their hot little hands, it was very difficult to go back and fix some of the underlying core gameplay mechanics and the underlying code base to scale properly to the massive scale that it's out now. Right. And also allow them to put it on multiple platforms and stuff. And I'm pretty sure for the past few years, the mobile version has been outselling the PC version. So in the last few years, they've been spending a lot of time going back through and recoding how things are stored in the database, things are stored in the game, how the names are done so that things can scale a lot bigger. And allow Minecraft to continue on for much longer. And I feel like almost everything here, they're rewriting the internals of how the GUI works. They're constantly working on frames per second issues. They're looking at how quickly code gets processed, in all its varieties. Just looking for all that core stuff so that once they get to a stable version, they can release it and they can feel comfortable that they're not going to have to go back and rework core portions of the code again. And I think a lot of independent developers are seeing what happened with Minecraft and making sure that when they code things now, it's for the long term,
right?
Because you never know how big your game could potentially grow to be.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So good job.
It's really good. Yeah, really good job to be doing it this way. One thing to note here that's pretty cool is the thanks to our seeding, they improved the link time in Visual Studio. So the final release, Factorio with all optimizations and link time code generation took 45 minutes to complete the link. And now it takes 3.5 minutes.
Yeah,
which
that's
is huge.
Impressive. Now, I'm curious, are they saying that they actually went to Microsoft and got Microsoft to do something different inside of Visual Studio?
Provided Visual Studio.
They say that it improved in the 15.5 Visual Studio release. That tells me that's Microsoft. They actually went to Microsoft and said, hey,
wow.
We're designing a big game and we need you guys to put some new features into Visual Studio to make it faster for us.
That's awesome if they did that. Our seeding just optimized Microsoft.
Yep.
So yeah, that's actually really interesting. That's what it sounds like, kind of. That'd be super cool.
If we have any programmers who know Visual Studio, let us know in the comments what you think your opinion of that is.
Yeah, good point. So one last thing on this part is another possibility down on this last paragraph of this section is is to use a Factorio engine for a completely different game or for fast prototyping of crazy ideas. So that sounds pretty interesting. Is they could potentially like reuse the Factorio engine for a different type of game, or something like that. But now there's some really interesting stats. I'm not going to read all of them because you guys can come here and read them, but there are a few that are worth pointing out that are pretty ridiculous. I'm looking here. Let me know if you had any in mind you wanted to cover. Let's see.
No, not really.
So these
YouTube videos, I guess, is probably the number one.
Yeah, and to just really quickly confirm is so this is a comparison from the Friday Facts 88, which was done I think in like April of 2015. I checked. So that's what this comparison is. These numbers going from on this first section, I do see they've more than doubled their lines of code since then. Which is equivalent to now 35 average books. Jeez. Oh my goodness. Tons of sprites. Now over 5,000 resolved bugs. Oh yeah, so now from that point, from the Friday Facts 88 till now, it's gone from 56,500 to 341,000 YouTube videos. That's a lot.
Oh yeah, yep.
That is a lot. Tons of Google hits, forum posts. Oh, here's an interesting one. On Steam, 11,704 years of combined playtime. Oh my goodness.
You see things like this sometimes you just think, what are we doing with our lives?
Seriously, like if you were to, I don't, my history's not good enough to just write off the top of my head, no, but like, if you were to, like, from this point right now, if you were to go back 11,700 years in time, whatever was happening, that's like that's all Factorio playtime. Like that's how much playtime is here. It's from now to whatever was happening over 11,000 years ago. Yep. It's ridiculous.
That's nuts. 11,000 years ago, I think most of our civilization all still lived in Africa.
I think so, probably, because I mean the Egyptians
were what, 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, something like that,
or something like maybe 10, but yeah, I mean this is ridiculous. That's
like when we started farming,
pretty much, yeah. Good job,
as a
guys.
species.
So they sold back then. So this is huge. You can tell this is like the Steam release, right? Because 2015 wasn't like, it was only like 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and they'd only sold 75,000 almost copies. But that's when they were just selling it from their website, and they've now sold over 1.2 million copies.
That is awesome.
That is really, really awesome. I'm going to give some other cool comparisons here. There was one here that I liked. 2.3 years of playtime per bug that's been resolved. And then this chart, this graph here just shows the overall commit frequency. So some of the releases are pretty obvious,
yeah, you can see the spikes right in there.
That one shortly after 2017 would have been 0.15 release. And then this latest one was obviously
just what nuts.
Yeah, with 0.16 stuff. So pretty interesting, some pretty huge changes. One last thing I want to point out about this barrel thing is it's more of like a public service announcement. If you have not updated yet to past 16.7, if you're on 16.7 or before, do not update past that if you use barrels extensively until empty your barrels before you update, all right? Because there was some testing done.
You lose out on so much oil.
You lose so much fluid in your barrels. So the tankers do migrate. Okay, if you do have full tankers and you update, they will still have 75K, and then you empty them, and then they'll only be able to fill to 25. But the barrels don't work that way, right? So if you have barrels that are full, and then you update and you empty them, you only get 50 from the emptied ones, even though you came in with 250. So
I think I have something like 300,000 sitting in a big array.
Oh God,
Megabus. Yikes!
It's right. But I think that's it Any other thoughts?
Nope.
All right. We want to hear what you guys think, and let them know on the forum posts, or the forum thing as well, down at the bottom as they always link. This will be linked in the description as always, and until next time, we'll see